Hello everybody, it's Bob, the Model Hack, back with another project. Went out and purchased a second car wash, and today we're going to kit bash this one into a auto repair shop. As you can see, the base is as warped on this one as it was on the other one I purchased, and in this case it's going to create some problems that we didn't have on just building the straight kit. Okay, so here are the big cuts. We want a rectangular building, so this whole section is going to go the way of the dodo. And what you see in the last scene and the next scene is we're cutting this wall in order to place a new back wall along the back of the building. Now I did try to build the building on its foundation, but it immediately created problems getting everything lined up, and so I only used it as a template. This section also needs to be cut off in order to make the rectangle. The kit comes with this back plate that is the finished wall for the right hand side looking at it, and I thought about using it and doing some fills, but instead I just used it as a template, and you'll see that in a minute. The back plate did come in handy as a resource tool for just measuring and making sure everything lined up in a way that corresponds to the roof. Right here it would have been real nice to have the thing mounted on its base, but I was able to move the item around without going backwards in my work. So here's a piece of the wall that I used. I had this in my standard stock. It's a large brick wall from I forget who. I did have the smaller brick that matched the red part of the building, but since the other wall had the larger brick, I went with this material moving forward. So with no plans to use the rear garage doors, I cut the tracks out that held them in place and sanded the plastic smooth. Using my aggressive file would have been my preferred way to do the whole job, but it turned out to be a big pain. So there's some ridges on the pieces of plastic that I didn't know whether I was going to use or not, so I had to wrap a piece of sandpaper around the file so that it would move around the contours and not do too much damage in the absence of better information. In the end, it really didn't matter, but you know, it was one of those things when you're in the middle of it, you have to make a decision and plan forward. This plastic is really thin, and I'm not going to be able to use the silicone adhesive here, so I had to come up with a plan B. Off camera, I lost the piece that I cut for this, and I'm still looking for it, but I also glued these pieces in early. I realized that in order to get an interior in the office like we did on the last one and get this square, I was going to need to use the base piece. So I cut the back off. Did that off camera.
But then I test fit the top and realize that this, in the short term, will solve some of my problems. And I noticed that if I glue this in place, that little beveled edge is going to overhang the wall, so the back piece of this, and I wish I had my cut piece, so if it lays flat against that, it's going to stick out. So plan A was to possibly glue this down to the bottom and leave the roof off, and then do that filing. But I think plan B is going to be better, and I think I'm going to glue this roof in place, except for this piece right here. This will be glued. I'll glue that down so that that's square, and then I'll knock that piece off, and then I'll glue that across the back. Now, something else to notice here, if I can get out of my own light, is that the back of this brickwork is so thin that you can see it. Now, the bay doors here, like on the other one we did, are going to be up, and I'm probably going to install this upside down so that you have I'm going to glue it like this so that you can see this from the end. Problem is that I may not even use this because I'm going to put lifts in this piece, which is why I need the bottom of this. I need the bottom of this so that I can put the lifts here, then, because this is going to be a garage. This is not going to be a car wash. And so with all these changes, a lot of moving parts, I think I'm just going to do that gluing right now and then play the rest of this by ear, because there's a small chance that I won't even be able to use those garage doors, because if I put a lift in here with a car on the lift, that I won't have enough distance between the garage door and the car, and these are may have to be ultimately end up being removed or hidden somehow. So a lot of moving pieces and parts in this, so I'll just get to gluing it, and we will. Tonight I will order the lifts from Shapeways. I already found them on Shapeways, and I know they exist and I know what they look like. They are perfect for what we're going to do here. And on the other car wash that we built recently, that you weren't going to be able to see directly into the office space, where I just did a little quick and dirty shape so that if you caught a glimpse of it, you'd see that there was something that looked like an office inside of the building. This one, I think I'm going to go the next step, because this is going to be in a high profile area with direct line of sight from the center aisle, so that guests and other members of the club, if they look into the front, will be able to see straight in, unobstructed, to the office. And so we're going to do a higher quality job, and so I'm going to order some pieces and parts from somebody. And since this will be the inside, on the Model Railroad Hobbyist blog, a few of you gave some suggestions for dirtying up the inside of these buildings, and that will be done here. We will be dirtying up these walls, putting in a few scenic details, because you'll be able to see in from this direction, and So there'll be a lot of visual interest in there. So that's the way it's going to be seen. This is the way it's going to be seen from the aisle. This direction like this. I already test fit this, so it's this fooling around that I'm doing with it doesn't mean anything. So that's the way you'll see it on the layout. And these are typically California are painted white. If you look around and look around, these are white, not clear. So I'm going to paint these white from the inside here. This will get a paint job with the rest when I get around to painting. And then also the point I was going to make about this, I never did complete the thought. You can see the bricks, and so I'm going to have to put some sort of wall back here, which a car is only going to take up that distance, so these are actually extra thick, so I'm going to be able to hide some of this thickness visually by moving that wall a little bit in from this location, and it'll all look right to the eye, even though me and anybody who watches this video will realize that the dimensions are off just a hair from what would normally be prototype.
So top tip, when holding a piece in place, make sure you don't bow the piece of plastic where you're applying glue. This is just will set up the back wall to the building, and you can see in the middle section off on the very extreme right that I put in L brackets for additional support on that back. This is going on a club layout, so I expect it to be handled and not gently, so the additional support is warranted. So with the big cuts complete, now it's time that I put everything together more permanently, so I use CA at all the joints in order to adhere it firmly. That center section was a mistake, and you'll see that in a minute. I ended up coming up with an idea in order to make the depth of the bays a little bit more prototypical. Now in reality, that center wall really wouldn't be there, but I'm not so sure that a repurposed car wash turned into an automobile dealership or auto repair shop would have knocked that wall down. So I left it there for practical strength in the real world, and wasn't worried about the prototype. So here's how I managed the weakness in the back wall there, is putting in L, and I did this just quick and dirty by gluing the piece right out of the package, cutting it long, and then cutting it back after the glue set up. And then I just filed off the extra area. So with everything in place, I mounted the one-piece building onto its foundation to see where the rubs were, and it turns out that those little corner pieces and the center wall rubbed up against the factory holders there, so some fine detail work cutting on the base in order to get everything to fit properly. I'm sure you all can see the waviness in that back wall line, and that was part of my decision to make a change on that wall in part. When I built this model, the Northern California, and so we were getting warm days and cold nights, and so there was some expansion involved in this, and if the plastic in the back wall were thicker, it probably wouldn't have mattered. It would have expanded in a way that would have been hidden inside the building, but since it wasn't, the plan B that I came up with will solve the problem altogether. So I'm teasing this plan B pretty hard, but the only thing I'm doing with it in part one of this video is cutting this wall back and painting the whole building, because what I ended up doing was pretty. The idea sort of grew as it developed in my head, and it became a little bit of a project. So it is a substantial part of video number 2 coming up in the coming days or weeks, or however long it takes me to get to the video. So with a couple of coats of paint in the books, this is how the windows turned out, and now I'm going to do some more work on that base, removing some more material in order to get everything ready for this big Plan B unveiling I've got coming. So this is where we're going to leave it today. Building ready to go on its base, and we'll be starting the big details in the next video.